Jamie, 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 Jamie. Well, it's just we can't share.
You can't see the roof. It's blue screen. That's what they do. And you just a crash and it's going to be on the thing. Debate. Some of my Facebook. Okay, that'd be great. Hey guys! Just a quick announcement before we start the debate. If anyone has any crash issues that they need sorted for tonight, if they need to be accommodated, just come up to me after the debate and I can figure that out. Go. Thanks. Steve, are you speaking first? Yeah, we're just gonna start by like sitting up. What's the song called? Hello again. Oh, we meet again. Nice to see you. Hosted by the Development House. So the motion before the House this evening is this House is a white Catholic with socially liberal political principles with publicly disaffiliate from the Catholic Church. And that's set by a wonderful CA team of Ruth Crash and Katrina. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our very special guest chair that we have for tonight's debate. So in the chair we have the former president of the Elizabethan Society in 1965, Dr. Melissa Webb. So Dr. Melissa Webb, she was a college debated throughout all quarters of Ireland, including against our beloved President, Michael Higgins, and she is now the chairman of the Association Trust Board in Trinity College Dublin. So without further ado, I'd like to go to give a warm round of applause to our guest chair this evening, Dr. Melissa Webb. But since Kingsmill Moore was a man, and most Kingsmill Moore finalists have in fact been men, nobody cares! Let's be misandrous to the bitter end and ignore all the men. You actually should have seen the reaction of some of Trinity's meninist population when we took their invitational away and replaced it with a women's competition. Lads coming up to us and saying, like, you can't take away like the fun, like banter open. And we were like, but like women's competitions are actually really, really fun. They're way more fun than girl competitions. And then they just got really sad with these puppy dog guys and would come up to you and go, but not for me. Noonan wanted to sell real manly motion about like manly stuff like guns and war. And pens. Instead of just selling like normal motion about guns and war, he said emotion about pens. This house believes in solving international disputes. The sword is mightier than the pen. And like of course that left the dialogue completely open to first stop getting up and being like, yeah, but if you want to pay your army, you need a pen to sign a check. And if you want to go to war, you need to write a declaration. Pen. So obviously we win. Hands on. It's not even the worst motion that I've ever heard like a male debater suggest. Actually, at Zagreb Euros, one of our delegation was walking through the streets of the city and saw this group of debater lads all kind of laughing together and having banter. And one of them just goes really loud, so loudly that our friend could hear from across the road. Ha! Yeah, this house would love tits even more. And then another one goes, prop heavy.
Are there any objections to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate record of the last public business meeting? There being none, I should duly sign. So, President Sarah Mortel, Officers Council, and the Hist Auditor Michael Coleman, Officers and Committee. This is a very exciting and historical International Women's Day. There are women here from Australia, England, Germany, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And we have the judges. Welcome to the judges. Katrina O'Brien, Crash Daly, Dee Courtney, Annie Williamson, Lorna Bowe, Derny Kelly, and Rosalind Lee Shulabone. Before us is this House as a devout Catholic with socially liberal political principles, would publicly disaffiliate from the Catholic Church. Now, there are standing orders which I'm going to read to you. Speeches are a maximum of 7 minutes in length for all student speakers. Protected time and points of information. After the first minute of each minute, there will be a bell. After this, speakers from the opposite side of the table are free to offer points of information. Maximum 10 to 15 seconds in length. If you're refused, sit down. Before the last minute of the speech, there will be another bell. No more points of information. At the final minute, there will be a double bell and wrap up the speech. As this is a contested debate, no points of information are permitted to be offered to the audience. We do, however, encourage general participation. If you get to something you like, you can shout here, here, and if you hear something you dislike, you can shout shame. So without further ado, we will start the debate. Now, for the first speaking order, the first composition, speaker is Daisy.
Close enough. Ladies and gentlemen, my Catholicism isn't about people or rituals or incense, it's about God. I can have my God and not be complicit within a religious organization that would use such a God as an excuse to oppress, to harm, to punish, and ultimately to alienate. I also think I can make it possible for other people to have this as well. In furtherance of that, I'm going to talk about three main points. I'm going to talk about, first of all, why it is possible to separate and to disentangle faith and spirituality from the Catholic organization. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the personal benefits that I'll derive from this. And then thirdly, then, I'm going to talk about wider societal impact. In terms of a model or a mechanism, I don't really think that's particularly necessary. I'll use whatever access or means is available to me to publicize this, whether Facebook status or indeed a press conference, depending on my station in life. Right, okay. So there are massive benefits to having access to faith and spirituality. The concept of being unconditionally loved in a way that you cannot screw up. The concept of not being alone, of mattering, of having purpose, of being someone who will eventually do something worthwhile if you simply commit yourself to doing good, to doing the right thing in as much as you are capable of. That is wonderfully beneficial. However, those in power since time immemorial have seized the gates to the kingdom of those benefits and have held hostage those benefits and demanded in return your material wealth, your unquestioning loyalty, and the right to see to them complete and utter capacity to determine the scope, the nature, the parameters of that religion or that access to that faith and spirituality. They get to tell you what the words mean, the particular way in which you can have access to those benefits, the particular way in which you should pray, who you should be exactly before you can have any of that love, any of that meaning, or any of those things that would make it easier for you to exist in this planet, to understand why you are here. We say it is time we take that back. That only happens when someone who is within such an organization can talk about why they are not necessary to have access to those benefits. That's what I want to do. Even if I don't succeed, though, I say that I get a ton out of this, personally speaking. Right? Okay. So why is it that it is possible to disentangle the specific rituals? Because we say that those rituals and that community, yes, technically made it easier for me to have, made it easier for me to have access to God initially, like going into it with someone else, like the particular prayers that I would have been taught, the particular songs that I would have been taught, did make it easier to find spirituality and to find God on a deeper level. But they're not crucial, they're not necessary. See, for instance, that we share the Bible in common with lots of other Christians who have very different pathways and very different rituals to have access to that same religion and spirituality as an indication of this. Not yet. And so we say they're not necessary. They will be missed, but they're worth sacrificing if it means that I can do this both for myself and for wider society. Moreover, also, we say that this is better. This isn't only better because, and for the reason I'm going to talk about later on, of why it is always better when you can decide for yourself the parameters of that faith and the ways in which you want to live, and the ways in which you have access to that. But moreover, it's better because we say it'll always be poisonous. The Catholic Church isn't accidentally a horrible organization. We say that whenever there is absolute power, that absolute power corrupts. What more power can there be than having the authority to define the rules for how someone should live, such that they'll have access to eternal happiness? Like that is more power than any other organization, any other individual stakeholder has access to. Because this isn't just affecting your life now, it's your life forevermore. And it's access to something beyond anything else that humans can give you. It's this unconditional, ultimate love and indeed meaning. That kind of power will always corrupt. That's why there's such bloodshed to hang on to that power. That's why there's such oppressive delineation of the scope and who can have access to it, such that you can always maintain that structure. That's why also that it's done in the worst way possible, because in the small hands of a small group of people who have a very specific worldview, they get to decide those absolute rules. And they did it a very long time ago when we thought more stupid things than we do today, like the rights of women, the rights of minorities, and all of those things. So when it was set up in the worst way possible. When it's perpetuated the worst way possible. So it is very difficult for me to be a liberal, conscious, whatever else it was that I was in that motion, and simultaneously be part of this religion. So that's why, secondly, on a personal level, this is very, very good for me. It means I no longer have to wrestle with myself at night. as to to be complicit and to uphold this organization, to allow them to continue to do what they do by tacitly supporting and tacitly endorsing what they do when they oppress and rob choice from other people and they alienate them and they put them down, while also simultaneously trying to remember that all through the New Testament, the only thing that it's said to matter is God's love and God's forgiveness. Indeed, it says that all the other rules of old in the Old Testament and all the different things you tried to do to have access to God's love, like killing sheep or burning things or not wearing certain kinds of wool, you no longer have to do now. You simply have to love and forgive. Why it is that I try to both believe in that and believe in all the other horrific things that it is that the Catholic Church says that you should do in order to be complicit within this, like be really, really mean to gay people. So we think for me on a personal level, this is better in not having to deal with that angst. We say, moreover, it's also better when I can decide for myself the parameters. I'll take you after this in like 8 seconds. The parameters and the nature of my own faith. We say that's better, and that means that I can live within a way that is truly more fulfilling. Very quickly opening.
There are actually a number of benefits to being part of a religious community.
Yeah, that's okay. I've conceded those. I've also said that they're worth sacrificing because it's better than all the angst of keeping myself awake at night while trying to figure out how I can both be a God-fearing, loving, and forgiving person and being a really horrible person to other people around me, whether overtly or complicitly. We do concede that community is a good thing. We just say it's not as good as getting to be my Christian my own way, right? Secondly, then, we say wider societal impact, because we think that beyond me, this will spark a really crucial conversation of why it is that we do let a bunch of old white men decide the rules for how it is you should live your life, to have access to these benefits. Why it is that you cannot, with your own reason, your God-given reason, decide for yourself, figure out what those are, given that we were given a conscience by this same God, given that quite a long time ago there was no incense or Catholic Church or any of these other rituals, given that there was just Adam, Eve in a garden with some trees and some fruit, possibly, or maybe not even that, but there wasn't a pope and there wasn't anything else, and people still managed to have communion with God. People still managed to find spirituality, still managed to find meaning. If it's possible, then it can be done again. We think this sparks the conversation when someone from within this organization said it no longer needs to be this way, it no longer needs to be propped up. We can have it all, ladies and gentlemen. I beg you to propose.
I would like to thank Daisy for her words and call on the first speaker for the opposition, Amy Cassidy.
Stereotypes for a reason. Madam Speaker, today we would sympathise with everything Daisy says. We think that religion in today's world is a difficult kind of path to take, especially when you have so many people who are questioning that choice, so many young liberals who would like to tell you that that choice is invalid and not correct. We would also say that those kinds of choices can be difficult, and grappling with those are always a difficult choice to make. However, we would also say that the Catholic Church has, especially in recent months, seemed to be hearing people's asks for change and help. They have been changing. It has been very clear since the resignation of Pope Benedict and Pope Francis's coming into the Catholic Church as the Pope. We've seen massive public comment from the Vatican and from the Pope himself saying that he supports loving every member of his congregation, coming out against aspects of the doctrine and saying that he does want to move towards a Catholic Church that is more inclusive, a Catholic Church that does value all its members, a Catholic Church that helps all kinds of people from all kinds of places, and especially the developing world, where we saw very recently he came out and supported people moving forward with their religion and how that kind of worked. Okay, so we would also say, and so within this we would say that unconditional love is a very important aspect of that ontological security that we know that people are always seeking out. So a couple of brief points of rebuttal before I go into my substantive, which is briefly just talking about like how individual choice actually works and the metric for which you should be judged on that choice, but also how these how these movements change over time and how we need to adapt to that within these kinds of movements, and how staying in those movements can often be the most important aspect of changing that movement and can be the deciding voice. Okay, so we heard a little bit about like how Catholicism, like how it has changed, how the rituals give you access to the meaning, and how you should and that how you should be sacrificing that for those political values that you strive for. But what we would say on our side of the house is that you have no obligation to move towards that kind of thing. You are human. You can hold dissenting political views while having a religion that doesn't agree with that. We are coming into an age where there is more debate than ever before, and we think that there are better aspects, there are better ways of going about that kind of discussion, as opposed to leaving the Catholic Church and then not having a valid voice within that church and not being able to speak out against that. We would point to numerous people who have been like excommunicated or voluntarily left the Catholic Church, whose opinions have then been invalidated by the fact that they are not members of that church anymore. And we would say that in order for those people to have change, while being religious and while aspiring to be good people under the religion that they believe in, we would say that the most necessary thing for them to do is to continue to follow that religious doctrine. Okay. A little bit about why individuals shouldn't have to place political values over religion. So we think that like those religious values and the social values that you are like being told to hold are difficult to have. As I would point to, like Pope Francis has come out and started to change things. We think that change is very slow, and it is going to be slow. Like we're not going to say anything else, but we think the most important aspect is to always have a strong voice within that Catholic Church that is pushing for it. If every single person in the Catholic Church who held like strong to moderate, like leftist, liberal kind of views, left the Catholic Church, you would be left with like a far more radical, far more traditional, right-wing kind of group. And that is not the kind of world that you want. If you value that religion, you should have the ability to ask for change and to seek it out. I think that the only way you can do that is by providing an active voice within that community. Because what Daisy didn't want to listen to when Beck brought up her POI is that community can be a really important part for your identity and for your ability to have some kind of ontological security. It's not just going to church every week and listening to a priest recite prayers and rituals that you've heard since childhood. It's often about feeling that you are part of a supportive community that shares your values and that understands your place in society. And when you can come forward to those people who uniquely understand your struggle with your social values of perhaps like agreeing with gay rights or thinking that condoms are okay, and those people can understand as well your desire to be a good Catholic and to live within that religion, we think that that's the best outlet for you to have that discussion and the best place for you to be able to share those kinds of views openly.
Okay, so given that we've already told you that we think it'd be better to have our God without the baggage and the personal turmoil that you have under your side of the house, like what voice do you have? Do you get up in mass and complain in the middle of like the ceremony, or do you go and give a press conference and put up a very public status about your problems?
So we think that the ways that you complain, and this sort of goes into my second argument, that the ways that you complain are structured within the church already. So you wouldn't go to the mass of a priest who publicly says that all gay people should be excommunicated from the church and who says horrible things that you don't believe in. You'd find priests that you do agree with. There are liberal movements within the Catholic Church of people who've come together and who do ask for more for liberalization within the Catholic Church. There are groups you can form, and if for whatever reason I am wrong and there is not that group, you can form it, right? There are lots of people within the Catholic Church who have come out and who have said that they do have this kind of struggle with their religion and their social values. So those kinds of movements do happen, have happened, and should happen, and they should be active voices in lobbying the Catholic Church for the kind of change that that everyone in the Catholic Church, or that people in the Catholic Church are seeking. So we also, so this kind of brings me on to my third point, which is why splitting off doesn't actually make people disaffiliate. You are not going to get a mass movement when you do this, like Daisy wanted to tell you. You may be able to hold a press conference, but you would be no different from the many Catholics before you who had left the movement. So what we would tell you is that you should instead seek to form change within that kind of within that kind of group. Your capital that you have is only available so long as you're within the group and you do seek out that change. Whether that change is going to be through like funding different parishes or like supporting different priests or like pushing forward your views or just writing letter after letter to the Vatican suggesting the change that you want to see. Like, talking to leaders within this kind of context is a good thing. But we think that, especially considering there are many Catholics who have supported these kinds of socially progressive views, and that the Catholic Church has been changing, we would say that the Catholic Church does understand people's need to like grapple with their social, like their social kind of principles with their religion, as well as the fact that it is changing and it will change over time. And the most important thing is that there remains a voice and a liberal voice within that community to continue to push that change. Because without that voice, all you're going to have is traditionalist, like archaic kind of values that are continually pushed forward, proud to oppose.
Second speaker, first proposition, which is Megan Yard.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking to you about two main points this afternoon or this evening. Firstly, basically about the minority groups within the religion and like the horror that they have to experience by being part of like institutionalized religion, despite like their love of having their faith. And secondly, I'll be talking about how we're disempowering the tools of the like white, like old, wealthy men who completely control the Catholic Church and like make it hell for everyone else, and like how we're taking that away from them. But firstly, 3 points of refutation to the speech before us. Okay, so firstly, she came up here and she told us that, well, look, the church is getting a bit cool. We have a cool pope, like he's pretty chill, like the changes are happening. Firstly, we say those changes just aren't enough. Like we're not willing to accept those changes on the grounds of like all of the people who've had to experience homophobia, who've had to experience sexism, like horrible things at the hands of the Catholic Church for the past. We don't think because we've got a mildly chill pope that that's particularly enough for us to stay part of this institution. But furthermore, we don't think he's doing it for particularly positive reasons. We think he's doing it as an attempt to grapple on to holding on to people to make sure that they stay part of the church. It's not for the good reasons. Once, like, if they manage to get like a proper grip, no thank you on people again, they'll go back to their old ways because that's like how this institution runs. Secondly, the whole idea of like, well, you don't have a voice if you leave like the church. Like as Daisy said, like, are you going to stand up in the middle of the church and like scream LGBT slogans or like, that's not a voice. You don't currently have that. You can't make an equity complaint to your bishop who is already part, no thank you, of this horrible like institutionalized sexism and homophobia that occurs. Like we think you actually probably have a lot more of a voice if you're outside it, if you say like, I care about my faith, I care about God, but even I could not cope with the horrible things of that this church does. No thank you. Like we think that makes like a lot more of a statement. We think that the whole change from within stuff just doesn't occur because we've been seeing it for like, the last thousands of years and nothing's actually being made any better. And then finally, this whole idea they brought us of community and that like, well, you need the church because you need some buds. We think that like the church manipulates you into thinking that you need them to be around you. We think, I don't know, join your local feminista or something. Like you can find a community there. Like you don't need to be part of the church. They just want you to think that they need you. Okay, that you need them. Okay. So on to my first point, basically, how we think this impacts like minority groups within religious faith. So regardless of like what your opinion is on like on religious belief, like as Daisy's outlined to you, like it's extremely important to certain people. Like it's intrinsic to their like sense of self that they have like this religious belief that like makes them think that they're not alone, that there's someone out there looking for them, looking after them, and that there's an afterlife and all these sort of positive things. However, we think that there's a major problem when certain individuals find that two inherent aspects of their being come into collision with each other. So like people who are like LGBT, who are members of the LGBT community, or women who are involved in the Catholic Church, who on a daily basis have to like suffer with the fact that they have to deal with the like horrible side effects of being part of the Catholic Church whilst actually trying to be them as being themselves as people. You don't find that when you actually just have, like, I have my religious faith, I throw away all these horrible, like, side effects that the Catholic Church has been forcing upon us because I have my faith and I'm happy, like, who I am as a person. So we think that, like, what happens in the status quo is, yeah, actually, go.
The Irish Republic has stood out with really atrocious things, stuff like child abuse, all of that stuff. Am I allowed to be proud to be Irish and do that?
Well, actually, we don't really like the concept of being proud of your nationality because we think it's really arbitrary and really stupid. But like, you can be proud of whatever you want to, but if you want to actually try and make some change, so we say that you don't continue to like go on with an organization that's committed like horrible things if they're against like what you believe in. No, thank you. So what we think that's currently happening is the fact is that like if you're a member of the LGBT community and you're part of the Catholic Church, that like you either like completely hate yourself because you think you are like a human sin, or you completely turn away from this church and you turn away from faith. So, like, because you can't actually just deal with existing within this faith. We think that's secondly, like, with women, like when the church constantly tells them that they're subhuman, that you are nothing but like a vessel for the men of the church. We think that what happens is that women either like keep on working with their faith and being part of an institution that's inherently against them, or they turn away. So what happens? No, thank you. So what happens that like when they continue to be part of the church, like nothing actually changes, like the status quo continues on, or they ignore their faith and they turn their backs away, which loses all of the change that the opposition are trying to talk about, because these people can't stay engaged with their faith because they don't think that they have a place in faith anymore, because they don't live up to what their faith suggests that they should be when it's wrapped up in churches. We think that when you separate religious belief and make it like a thing that's part of you as a person, it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, it doesn't matter who you are as a person, you can live out that faith. We think it completely strengthens people's faith and makes them like more able to exist. And we think that like we would much prefer a world where like people are happy in like their faith as opposed to like hating themselves and thinking they're a product of like the devil or whatever. Okay, so on to my second point about how we think that like continue on from that, how this disempowers the tools of the like men who command like religion, the Catholic Church. So as it stands, like because religion is tied to the institutions and all this kind of like arbitrary stuff that Daisy told you about, we think that like religion is used as a tool for like horrible advantaged people who overrun religion and just like direct it for whatever is advantageous to them at any given moment. Like we see like these Americans like shaking their Bible and like justifying like sexism, homophobia, like the war on Iraq, like banning contraception, like all of these like horrible things that people use religion to justify when it actually has absolutely nothing to do with faith in the first place. We think these people like manipulate the very basic, like no thank you, like naive kind of innocent aspects of faith and just not wanting to be alone and just not wanting to think that like you're going to die and nothing will happen. We think that they manipulate that when you give them the power through like subscribing to like the Catholic institution, because they can then use it to justify all of their actions. They can then use it to justify them because they are God's chosen people, because the Bible says so. We say that like when you remove like this inherent kind of like physical structure around faith, when you remove the institutionalization and the like capitalist institution from around religion, you create like a system where you take away these excuses that these people constantly use for like overrunning the world and like making like stuff like just unpleasant for everyone. Like the fact is, under the status quo, we have to listen on a day by day basis to the Catholic Church being extremely homophobic, being extremely sexist, and justifying horrible actions based on the grounds of, well, look, I'm God's chosen person, like, it's okay, lads. What we want to change is we want to take faith away from the people who use it to like try and ruin the world and just put themselves forward and make it a personal experience that can be like utilized by anyone who needs God at any moment. So we beg you to propose.
So, ladies, and for the first time today, I'm able to say also ladies and gentlemen, we're very, very proud to stand in opposition to this motion. And we think that so far, First Proposition have done an excellent job of beautifully like articulating why they think there are problems with the Catholic Catholic Church. And of course, we don't disagree, right? But in order for this wonderful fairyland to eventuate, in which everyone is able to divorce their faith from the Catholic institution, and where all of the members of the LGBT community and female members of the Catholic Church are going to be liberated from the strongholds of white male oppression, right? You would have to assume that every single member of this church is going to publicly disassociate in the way that the government wants them to in this debate, as opposed to just you as one socially liberal individual, right? And they give you no reason to believe why one social liberal would then lead to this kind of avalanche of people leaving the church, or indeed why the entire socially liberal and progressive portion of the Catholic Church disassociating would do absolutely anything, right,
Madam.
to change the behavior of that church as a broader institution. And what we say is that actually it wouldn't change that church. In fact, as Amy tells you in the first speech, it would be more likely to radicalize that church. And then the situation you would have would be that all of the oppressed women and all of the oppressed members of the LGBT community within that church would be stuck within an increasingly regressive and discriminatory organization that would harm them. And we do not think in any good conscience you as a social liberal should be able to take that action. So what am I going to look at in this speech? Firstly, I'm going to look at the most effective mechanism for achieving change within this debate, right? Because we think that fundamentally this debate is simply put about that. How do you get change within an institution? It might also be about religion, and I'm also going to talk about how you as an individual should interact with your own religious values towards the end of my speech, but I first want to deal with mechanisms for change, right, and the effect that we see on minority groups, like they wanted to talk about there. So first of all, right, and they challenge us to say, how are you going to get change from within as a socially liberal person who's staying within that Catholic Church? They say, oh, what are you going to do? Stand up and chant slogans during the congregation? Well, no, probably not. And actually, Amy gave you some very realistic mechanisms for how this might work that weren't engaged with, but I'm just going to go over them once more, right? We think that, first of all, you have money. You as a member of the Catholic congregation use your money to show what things you want to support, right? Like the Catholic Church relies on your money in order to do all the things that it wants to do. You can choose where you put those donations and use that as a voice to make your political opinions heard. Secondly, right, you have the ability to lobby internally. You have the ability to write letters. I don't know, maybe you could write on catholicforum.org or something. I'm sure that exists, right? We think that thirdly, you can also lobby externally. And as Amy already explains to you, you have a lot more credibility when you lobby externally if you're able to say that you're a member of the Catholic Church for two reasons, right? Because firstly, people will credit your voice as being a representation of that community. Secondly, right, you also have more an influence on that church because you can do things to embarrass that church, where you can stand up and say, as a practicing member of the Catholic faith, I reject the things that are going on within the church today. We think that is far more powerful than you as a recently disassociated member of the Catholic Church saying, oh, these really horrible things happen within that church, where the church has the ability to say, no, they're no longer part of our community. We discredit everything they say. They're just trying to lie to make us look bad, right? We think that these are all mechanisms that you can do. We think you can even advance to positions of authority within that church. And we'd say that every liberal person that chooses to leave the church now is one less liberal person that could potentially become a priest or a pastor or someone higher up in that church later on down the track and actually be able to advocate for change from within. That's what you should be doing if you want to be consistent to your political beliefs, ladies and gentlemen, right? The alternative that we heard from the government, no thank you, is that maybe the fact that you post on Facebook that you have left the church is going to start a conversation. And we'd like to hear a lot more about what they think that conversation might be and why that might actually be in any way effective whatsoever. We simply don't think that's going to be the case. What will be the case when, when more and more liberal people start to leave the church? The case will be the church no longer needs to cater to these individuals in order to retain them as members. The case will be that those remaining people who exist within that organization will continue to radicalize, become more regressive, become more conservative, and I'll take back half in a second as a result. And we think that that is only going to be more damaging for the minority groups that they care so much about. But before I get to them, go.
Okay, so as an individual, I care about how my friends and family perceive me. I also care as a Christian about spreading the good things that Jesus said. Surely, I don't want to be tied to a transphobic, homophobic, sexist organization.
Well, as I'm going to get onto later, there can be some benefits to being part of a religious institution. But furthermore, right, if you care so much about your values, right, it's not necessarily a good, application of those values to say, I am simply going to wash my hands, note the religious reference, of everything, right, that is going on within this institution and just leave and pretend that I have nothing to do with it, right? What I've literally just spent 4 minutes telling you is that you as an individual individual in this church have a very real ability to generate change within that institution. And if you care so much about your values, I think your friends and family would respect you a lot more if you stayed within that institution and actually stood up for those values. So thanks for that. So, minority groups, right? And like, we hear some very like great emotive stuff from First Proposition about why it's really difficult for people to, for example, reconcile their sexuality with religion. We think that's entirely true. We think it's absolutely like tough for these people, yes, but exactly what you're getting on your side of the house is you're taking the choice away from those sorts of people. And yet maybe Daisy's okay with practicing her faith at home in her bedroom without being part of that congregation. But maybe some of the people who are women or LGBT within the Catholic Church would like to keep going to church every week, right? And we think we should also respect the rights of these people to be able to like maintain their relationship with that organization. And we think that right now on your side, the choice you give them is say, either do what I'm doing and get the hell out, right? Or you're stuck there to be discriminated against for the rest of your religious life. We don't think that's very nice. So last of all, right, how do I reconcile this as an individual with my religious beliefs and my religious values? Because they want to say, we'd prefer to have the God without all of the baggage. As we've already pointed out to you, we think that the things like the sense of community or the fact to like, you know, commune with your other fellow Christians can be really valuable. Furthermore, right, we think that some people might just like being cultural Catholics and going along to like light candles and chat to their friends every week. And we don't think that they on their side of the house have a right to judge these people. We think that there are perfectly legitimate reasons to want to be part of an organization, and we're perfectly happy for these people to continue to do that and to not be willing to trade that off for like the risk of being associated with an institution that they find to be distasteful. Especially, right, when we say that choosing to leave that organization wouldn't even have any kind of impact whatsoever. So we don't really see what type of trade-off they're trying to make there. Even if we thought, right, that by leaving the Catholic Church, you'd be able to bring them down and like liberalize them overnight, we don't think we'd force individuals to make that trade-off. But in reality, we think that they'd be far, far better off able to achieve their political goals if they maintained within the system and tried to push for change within, more than proud to oppose this motion. In extension, Lucy and I want to talk about three things. Firstly, we're going to talk about why the Catholic Church will never change and how we can never get the type of change that they want to talk about by saying it will just never happen. Secondly, we're going to talk about your own individual relationship with God as a Catholic and how that affects that. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about religion and how you interact with other people within that religion, how you practice that religion in a like community-based and like meaningful way when you disaffiliate from that. Like firstly, we have a couple of points of rebuttal. Like first off, say that if you actually like have views that go against that church, then you have a responsibility to stay for those people who are left behind. Like firstly, we say, why do you necessarily have to become a martyr for your own and like sacrifice the practicing of your own religion for those people? But then she says we must stay and speak out so we can change things. We say, like, firstly, you can't ever speak out within that church, because whenever a person does speak out within that church, the Pope always threatens to excommunicate them. So they silence those people's voices, so we don't get that kind of speaking out, and that kind of change doesn't happen within. Okay, so firstly, why the Catholic Church will never change. Like, the Catholic Church has massive amounts of power and wealth. It has like over 1 million followers worldwide. It's massive amounts of sway and influence when it can do things like get Cuba and the US to talk for once. So like the Catholic Church has massive amounts of sway worldwide. So when we have such a powerful institution, it necessarily won't ever change. It has never changed. Notice that society has changed rapidly and massively over the number of years, but the Catholic Church still espouses basically the same values that it did thousands of years ago. It doesn't seem to be moving or progressing in any way. And then they say, well, Pope Francis is a bit cool now. but he's just saying the same thing as all the other popes says. He just says it in a different way when he says, don't breed like rabbits, but you still can't use contraception, or we're cool with gays, but you're evil if you practice your homosexuality. Like, it's the same kind of crap, and we never get that change. So we say that when you're someone who speaks out and says, I can't ever like invoke the kind of change I want, I'm going to remove myself from that and practice my religion in a meaningful way outside that, and I can do that, and people seeing me doing that, they're more willing to be inspired by me leaving that church, because they see that I can move on and I still can be that devout Catholic. I don't have to put up with all of the amounts of crap that they do within that church. I don't have to sit there as a gay man in a pew and listen to someone tell me I'm evil. I don't have to make that trade-off. I can still have that relationship with God in a meaningful way. Why does that relationship with God become more meaningful when you leave? We say, like, when you're part of an institution that like props up like misogyny and like homophobia, you necessarily like do harm onto those people when you like go to when you like sit in that church pew and that person walks in the door and feels unwelcome because someone is preaching, telling them that they're evil, and everyone else is looking on. So you're necessarily complicit within that act. We say when you leave that and you are not necessarily one of the people who condemns those people, you are actually carrying out the true work of God and the true meaning of God. So that relationship with God becomes more meaningful to you and is more like meaningful because it like you don't actually harm people. We say like it also like weakens the amount of power and sway the church has when they don't have that collective amount of supporters sitting there backing them up all the time when they do that. Like when ops say we can still, I'll take clean up the end of this. They say when you can form focus groups and like discuss your own like problems that you have within the church. We say you can't have open discussions with that, because every time you like go to a prayer group meeting and say, well, actually I'm pro-choice, and everyone looks at you and condemns you and thinks that you're evil for believing in that, it means it's necessarily harder for you within that to speak out. So we say when you remove yourself from this situation, you can necessarily communicate with other people about the things that you believe in, and not like fear that you're going to be like prejudiced against, or people that are going to be biased against you because of that. So you can actually like have a meaningful discussion about your values as a devout Catholic without like being part of an organization that's going to condemn you to do that, and you feel free to do that. Tina?
Do you think that if people are produced in the Catholic Church, they will still have their stranglehold and stuff like Irish education, Irish charity work? Is it better without any kind of voice in what kind of things are taught to my kids or other people's kids? Like, I literally know.
Okay, so you want to talk? Okay, we notice that this is like probably going to be like a small game. We notice that if lots of people leave, it's probably going to be a small game. We say like even if it is a small game, it means that the people that you interact with within that religion still get the benefit from that. So it means when you raise your child like talking about like the love of God that you feel is valuable, but you don't like send them to a Catholic school that is necessarily going to indoctrinate them into thinking like gay people are evil and they can't have sex before marriage, then it means that you've played like you've done like a good thing as a Christian, and it means like you've affected like some people's lives in some meaningful way. Like thirdly, how this forces you to engage with your religion in a more positive way, and how you can like carry out the true work of God, which a devout Catholic would believe, which is like spreading the real message of God without all the bullshit that the Catholic Church espouses. We say that like people necessarily perceive you by the way that you present yourself. So if you like form your identity around being part of an institution that espouses all those evil beliefs, when people engage with you, they necessarily associate you with having all of those beliefs. So they're less likely to want to talk to a member of the Catholic Church, because they come with all these preconceptions that that person will judge me because I'm pro-choice, or they'll judge me because I'm gay, or they'll judge me because I'm sexually active. So it means that we don't necessarily get the kind of interactions with people between like religion that they might necessarily want to have, and they might necessarily like get benefits from that, because we say there are like benefits from religion when you like become part of a community, or you get like some form of solace by believing in like a higher power, or like through prayer, things like that. So it means like we don't get the kind of engagement, which means you can't carry out your work as a Catholic, because you can't like try and get people to also get the benefits from that.
It also means that when we have someone who identifies as being Catholic, but not necessarily like a member of the like Catholic Church and espousing the same kind of beliefs that they do, it means that like, when we actually have voices that have some form of legitimacy when they espouse these beliefs, when they talk about God, you're more likely to get engagement with God and the kind of like discussions around God, what it means to be a Christian, and not that isn't necessarily tarnished by all the like misogynistic, racist bullshit that the Catholic Church espouses. So for all those reasons, we're proud to propose.
Thank you, Eve. Now can we have the first speaker, the second opposition, Helen Dawes.
Thank you for the floor. Essentially, in the speech, I'm going to do three things. First of all, I'm going to ask, why is it that those people who could Shanghai my belief structure, as Daisy puts it, get to continue to Shanghai my belief structure and make it what it shouldn't be and make it corrupt and awful? Secondly, we're going to give you specific mechanisms, unlike anybody else thus far, as to ways you can enact change from within. And thirdly, we're going to tell you why Catholicism improving is not only a net good for the world, but is a net good for me as a devout Catholic who at some point probably thought Catholicism was a good thing, hence why I became a devout Catholic, right? Before that, three pieces of rebuttal. First of all, non-believers and people who leave do not have influence. I'm going to make this very clear, right? Because you left God, you abandoned the cause. You do not get to call yourself a Catholic anymore if you publicly disaffiliate, right? Daisy's Facebook status might have this much like clout, but most people's don't, right? It doesn't work that way. Like if a bishop left, maybe. If the Pope left, definitely. But you as a lone wolf do not have that kind of influence, right? Secondly, all the baggage that comes along, like ritual, like the way that you prove your faith, the way that you sacrifice yourself, particularly important to Catholicism, right, is giving up your time, going through Lent, doing Mass, doing the things that prove your faith to God, right? It's not enough to say you're spiritual and have crystals, right? It's important that you do the ceremonies that show I am devout, I am proving myself to God, I am proving that I believe in Him, and that I need to demonstrate that belief above all else. So not getting to take part in those things is a massive problem. And thirdly and finally, right, this point that Neve tells you about, like, when you're complicit, you're supportive. That's probably true, right? It's probably true that you are complicit in a bad organization when you go and, like, give them money and stuff like that. Some people pragmatically weigh up that being able to change an institution from within is worth being part of something that historically hasn't done so well. So that's what we're going to talk about. Right. First of all, why should they get to Shanghai the faith that I know is the way to God, that I know is the way to truth, and continue to define it immorally, right? I don't have an internal contradiction about my sexuality and tolerance, because if Daisy can, like, sum up that tolerance is what God's all about, I sure can, and I read the book, right? Like, if I, as a devout Catholic, know that God loves me and loves everyone, and that they are messing with that message, they are corrupting God's love and making it something else, why should they get to win, right? Because God doesn't equal religion, but religion is the way that I prove myself to God, and religion is the way that God's message is generally imparted. So why should they get to continue to corrupt that for time immemorial, which is exactly what happens when I leave? Why should I have to sacrifice being, like, able to get married in the eyes of God, being able to baptize my children and make sure they don't go to hell because somebody else shanghaied the thing that was most important to me? Secondly, ways that you enact change from within. Right? Like, personal stories from congregation members have generally changed priests' minds before. If you go to a priest in confession and say, like, I don't want to be a bad person, but I think I'm in love with her, like, that's a real moving story. That's how lots of people have converted on LGBT before, is they hear that raw emotion. B, institutions, right? Particularly important in Ireland. I'm a teacher in a Catholic school. I'm on the school board. I help run the charity. I'm on the hospital board, right? The list is endless of things that I can only do because I'm in the in group, right? If I can make sure that charity still helps single mothers, if I can make sure that curriculum is a little less homophobic, that's probably a good thing. And something I can only do if I'm in the club, right? Ireland's not the only example. This is also true in, like, parts of Spain and parts of Portugal and other Catholic countries, because Catholicism has literally weaved itself into the geographical and political infrastructure of tons of localized geographic regions, right? Like, be a missionary. I can do that vastly better and impart the message vastly better if I'm within the group. I'll take you in a second, right? All of these things I can only do if I am a member, because there's no need to talk to non-members because they don't have faith. They don't understand the pivotal fundamental truth that I do, that God is real, that God will save us, and that Catholicism is the way to go, right? They don't know that, so I don't have to entertain them. Go.
We've given you reasons why it is that the Catholic Church can never fundamentally get better given when the way it was set up and the way it tries to hold on to power. Our message isn't get better, Catholic Church. It's rescind your hold on spirituality.
Okay, Catholicism has already gotten better. Slowly but surely, it has, right? Catholicism can never get better from the outside, right? Because religions aren't accountable to the state. They aren't accountable like businesses are. They aren't accountable like countries are. The only people they are accountable to are their members. That is the only people whose voices matter, because they are with God. They are beyond and outside all of those contingent societal structures that come and go over time, right? The thing they are on side with is God. So the only people that matter are other people who know that truth and other people who have that faith. Right. Thirdly and finally, why improving Catholicism is a good thing for me and for the world, right? If I chose at some point to be a devout Catholic, that's probably because I thought that Catholicism was a thing that was good for me and good for people, right? Was the way to heaven, was the way to eudaimonia, was the thing that I needed to do, right? It's no accident that I picked a missionary religion, a religion like one of whose fundamental tenets is going out and spreading God's words and telling other people this is the truth, right? I would have only chosen to do that if I felt convicted that this was, at its core, a good thing that people needed and people should have, right? As such, the fact that when I leave, that message will continue to be corrupted by people who don't understand God's love, who don't understand what their message should truly be, means that I have lost something fundamental to me, and it means that other people have lost something because I will no longer be able to say, no, this is what Catholicism actually is. This is what God actually is, right? Like, Catholicism has this massive influence that Neve talks about, for example, and that's a force that we should take advantage of, right? That's a force that should be turned towards things like encouraging more tolerance, right? The Pope came out and said income inequality is a massive problem, and it prompted this huge discussion that in America hadn't happened in freaking years, right? It is important that we hijack that force from within. It is important that we make it do good things overall, and you can't do it from the outside because you simply aren't involved in that discussion. Maybe it happens slowly and surely on our way, but on their way, it definitely doesn't happen at all, because then you're a heathen like me, and you're not really worth listening to, right? So what do we tell you on Side Off? We tell you that sometimes you have to be conflicted. Sometimes you have to be associated with something you're not entirely comfortable with in order to play the long game, in order to make that better for people and to make it better for yourself. But moreover, we tell you specifically in closing half why ritual and being part of that institution is important to you. But moreover, it means that the truth cannot be subverted by others. We're very happy to oppose.
There we go. That was the line.
Okay, in closing the case of the proposition, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about changing the church versus what I want to call it, let it go, let the church go. It's also snowing, so that's perfectly apt. And second of all, I want to talk to you about Christian duty and identity and how we can still get all of that on our side. First of all, Helen's speech. Okay, so first of all, if my voice if my voice leaving has no clout, how can they say that my voice staying has a clout? One voice is one voice. I'm going to give you loads of reasons, and Neve has given you loads of reasons in her speech how I can change my people around me's perceptions with my one voice, and how I can be true to the Christian values that I want to live with my one voice. But you can't say that you can change the church with one voice if us leaving doesn't have an effect either. Also, you can't fine Helen. We can no longer call ourselves Catholic church goers, maybe. That's something we have to give up. Whatever. We can still actually follow the things that made us love Christianity in the first place. We can still do things like love thy neighbor like you would love yourselves. You've told me to say that. You can also do things like prayer and helping people, and most importantly, not condemning people for who they are. We think that is a massive trade-off. Fine, but it's a trade-off people are willing to make. So I'm happy not to make get communion once a week, and I'm happy not to do all those things so that I can actually do the things that I wanted to do in the first place as a Christian. Right. We say like the Catholic Church aren't accountable to anyone. You're saying they're accountable to the people who go to their church. They're not. They use fear, shame, and exclusion to continue to perpetrate the power that they hold, right? Maybe no longer with hell and brimstone like imagery, but they use things like pray the gay away and telling people that they're wrong for believing the things that they believe and being the person that they are. No thanks. Right, changing and letting it go, right? So when we do this, we say that the Catholic Church can never represent me, that the crap that they espouse is not something that a devout Catholic wants to stand by. We say that, like, that is the institutions, that is not the people within it, and that certainly isn't me, right? We say that they will always have the power because they are, like, Debater Bingo, a massive hegemonic group that, like, gets to perpetrate what they want to do, like, because they have so much money, like. Okay, we say that, like, you can't stop that power by staying within it, because once you stay within it, you give them their power, because they have their power, because so many people follow them with blind faith. No thanks. We say that when you walk away, you break it. First opposition says, like, the money you use, the, like, letters you send, internal lobbying, like, we say that does very little, first of all, to a church who has, like, a massive vault that's probably full of lots of gold, and we have no idea what's in there. I don't think the couple of euro you put in, like, the basket is going to cripple the Catholic Church. Like, second of all, those letters probably aren't opened. Like, I don't see that changing the Catholic Church. And, like, finally, maybe you'll have a chat with your parish priest, and he'll just tell you to go and say the rosaries like a good girl, right? So, becoming complicit in the negative acts that they do and the opinions that they hold is something that we do not want to stand about. No, thank you. We say that, like, similar to the benevolent, slave words, Lucy. No thanks. Benevolent slave master case. Like, even if you love them, even if you love what they're doing to you, sorry, Cleena, like, you are being tied to what they're doing, like, what they're doing to you. By being connected to them, you are tying yourself to what is happening to you and to other people. So fine, now, like, when they, like currently when I go to church and they're condemning people and shaming them, I give that legitimacy if I don't say no, if I don't back away. If my friend who is trans wants to come into church and sees me sitting there or knows that I support that, they feel like I support that, because by connecting yourself to that, like, church, you are, like, saying that you agree with it. You are saying that you're okay with it, and you're saying it's okay to be a part of it. No thanks. Right, Christian duty and identity. So, like, we heard a lot about community, like, in the first half of the debate. So, like, being a part of that community gives the legitimacy to the parish priest that's really hard to say, parish priest who gay bashes, right? So we say, like, that's not okay? Because, like, I'll take closing in a second. Right, so we say that, like, you don't have to be stuck there. First proposition painted a picture of me leaving people who are also liberal behind. One, they can leave too. Happy with that. Probably really happy with that, because then I've got more people I can make a new community with. But also, like, they can say if they're happier being part of that, then cool. But we on proposition are saying not in my name, or my friend's going to be put down in that way. Helen.
Okay, so given that church continues to be awful after I leave, right? Why does my feeling good about myself being a principled liberal trump the capacity to possibly change that institution and other people's
Cool.
lives for the better?
Right. If you listened to what I said in my first speech or a lot of Neve's speech, like, let's let it go. It's not going to change. Like, they have lots of money. They have lots of power. They're not really going to change that much unless, like, all the grannies stop going to church every Sunday and giving them the legitimacy. But we don't see that happening. Maybe in, like, 30 years we can have that discussion. But right now, this is the discussion because that's the church we have now. No thanks. Right. So they say that, like, carrying out your duty as a Christian is very important to, like, me in this debate as the actor, I suppose. So, like, you are seen as an authority once you have left the church, because you can still say that you are someone who's been brought up within that system. You can still say that you're someone who believes in Jesus and the good that he taught. But now you're no longer tied to the negative things of the church, and you're no longer, like, it's no longer okay for atheists to just go, oh, they're a crazy religious freak, because you've said, no, I'm not tying myself to that bad stuff. So, like, the debate and the discussion that, like, both of us love to have, like, we like debating, shock. Like, we think that like that is more likely to be impactful when you can like no longer be silenced with shush shush crazy Christian. Like, we think that like the voice of like, oh, also Clino wants like you to be able to have impact on your community and on your child and on things like that. First of all, we say the Catholic Church don't like literally control everything, but like in situations that they do, like fine, you like I don't think you going to church means you have like say in educational Catholic educational policy, but like if you do, that's interesting. But I also think like it's way better that if your kid goes to school and learns that they don't come home and see that like mommy agrees with that the priest, because like that's way more likely that your church that your child is going to like agree with the negative things if they think that their mother agrees with it. If they see that their mother is taking a stand to not agree with it, they're likely to not agree with it. Helen talked about me choosing a religion that like believed in missionary work and stuff like that, and that being really important to me. I think that that is probably more likely that on our side we can actually help people, because people will listen to us, because we're no longer tying ourselves to hate. If you want to do good in the world like missionaries do, don't tie yourself to hate. We beg you to propose.
I now call on the second speaker for the opposition, Fiona Keller.
Okay, so like when I was still in school, actually I was specifically telling this story because in prep time I had to sing this song in my head to find out which commandment is the one that says you actually do have to go to church for God to love you, right? But this story tells two things. Number one, the fact that you cannot have it all and be outside the church, because you can't keep the Sabbath holy in the way that your Catholic God tells you to and be outside the church. But number two, it says that I was learning songs about the 10 commandments that I still can't get out of my head when I was in primary school and secondary school. Okay, so what we're going to talk about here is change. What they fundamentally don't understand, which is surprising given that we are in Ireland, is that the Catholic Church literally has a stranglehold on our hospitals, our schools, how we view charity, and how people are like generally educated, or if they fall out of like the bounds of society when the government can't help them, it's the church that helps them. It is better that we, on our side of the house at least, we have one socially liberal person who can affect that. I'm going to tell you specifically how that effect happens, as opposed to like Facebook like activism, which is apparently the prop. Shocking. Number two, the individual, like why it is that we're actually okay with people taking bigger burdens on themselves than just, should I be wrestling with my conscience every night, conscience every night, but whether or not it is that the church hates women. Okay, first of all, right? First off, say that you can change the conversation from the inside, right? What Helen specifically tells you is that changing the conversation isn't particularly difficult. And it doesn't mean that you stand up and shout LGBT slogans and that you stand up and shout, you are homophobes, you're transphobes, and effectively get like excommunicated. That's not particularly helpful. There are far more like I was going to say insidious. I'm going to say like more like roundabout or like more helpful ways to get that kind of change. Exactly, okay? So like when first props say that you spark a debate when you leave, bullshit. It's like no one gives a fuck if you leave, right? You're one individual. Okay. You're probably, if you're here, you're a female individual, so you care even less, right? Number two, though, right? If you're an outsider, you literally don't have God's mandate anymore. You have lost paradise. No one will listen to you because you're not listening to God. You have turned your back on God. You have turned your back on rightfulness. So it's not this stuff about like, not just because you're an outsider. Specifically, it's like a church is different from a corporation. It's not that they just don't listen to you because you're not part of them. Churches specifically don't listen to you because you are as fundamentally different from them as any one person could be. You have literally found Satan. Like listening to you is the opposite of what their individual mandate is to do. That's really problematic. When you consider that this person is apparently, like the person that I am, is a socially liberal, political, like loads and loads of adjectives kind of person. Now the thing is, right, if it is possible to change the church from the inside, no thank you. As an individual who is socially who has a socially conscience, let's pretend that's a word, like you probably do have like some kind of moral imperative to live your social liberalism, to make some kind of impactful change on the world, no thank you, that you can make. So we say that like that is entirely empty, effectively, if you're not willing to make that change, okay? And we say that change, again, doesn't look like you standing up, no thank you, shouting LGBT for life and getting excommunicated. What it probably looks like is, no thank you, if you're on the board board of management of like a Catholic school that you let them have a workshop about how to deal with homophobic bullying. Thank you, right? If you are working in like a hospital, or if you're like on the board of management of any of these places, which by the way, when Lucy says there are other ways to change that, there literally aren't. Like I can't even name like 2 schools that aren't under the auspices of some religious no thank you organization in this country. Some religious organization, Lucy, not necessarily Catholic, right? And the thing is, when it is the case, no thank you, that I can do things like allow those workshops to happen, or if I'm a priest and I can specifically choose to read readings that are tolerant and don't say stuff like homosexuals or like atheists are snakes, which is the kind of stuff we were read in school, but specifically when I can read stuff that says love is patient, love is kind. I don't know the rest of that quote because that's all that's ever in the films, right? When I specifically can make that kind of change, I use my social liberalism to change the life of kids who are going to be left in that system, no thank you, whether I leave it or not, right? If I leave the Catholic Church, not only do I leave the church, I have to leave that board of management, I have to leave that hospital board, because this is Ireland, or else it's a specifically Catholic country in the motion, right? Which means that given that I can make that change, I am probably, number one, like morally obligated to do, but specifically it's probably a good way for me to find salvation if my God is as loving as both of us seem to agree that he is.
Madam.
So no thank you, right? When we ask Second Prop about this, they say that like people leaving will obviously be a marginal gain for us, which does a spectacular job of not answering the POI, right? No, thank you. So like what we say is actually it is a huge loss to like those kids who are going to be taught Catholic crap, like the really bad stuff, whether or not you help them. No, thank you. And the stuff about let it go, let Catholicism be a thing, like good luck dismantling literally hundreds and hundreds of years of cultural and like political weaving of that stuff into our everyday lives. Like the fact that I work in an off license and can't sell alcohol on like Good Friday, okay? The fact, actually, you can only get alcohol on trains. That's a pro tip, right? On Good Friday, enjoy. Go for it in the gospel, right? The thing is, though, like, it will have that control, no thank you, whether or not I'm part of it. It is better that I'm able to like live that change if I am socially liberal POI. Go for it.
Okay, so all of millennia says you can't actually change the church from inside, priest or no priest. But if you are a priest in your version of things, it will matter when you leave very publicly. And maybe we can start a conversation about having religion outside of Catholicism, because you don't have to do it that
way. It won't matter. Like no one's going to care because you're the person who lost paradise. You're the person who lost God. Again, you have a really warped understanding of how religious organizations view these people. The individual, right? This stuff about conscience, like, note this debate is not about someone who is devoutly spiritual or devoutly religious. We think there are probably like tenets of Catholicism we can bring into this debate, like the third commandment, which tells you to keep the Sabbath holy, which you can't do if you're not engaging in that kind of like what the current epoch of that is, which is to go to church and to take communion, right? So that is like a net loss to you as an individual. Number 2, like Second Prop say that your conscience is compromised if you allow other people's perception of you to be tainted by the fact that you're sexist or transphobic or homophobic. If I am devoutly Catholic, or if like I'm just someone who really believes in God, I probably, number 1, care more about mine and their salvation, and that is my mandate as a devout Catholic, like see the motion, right? So I should probably care less about what it is they think of me and more about what God thinks of me, and that's probably what I do care more about. That point falls out of the debate. Like. But furthermore, like on a general point, just because my feminism is full of white people complaining about like their problems, and just because like my affirmative action is full of like people who are telling me that their problems are more important than me, does not mean that I have to allow them to Shanghai effectively that movement. Because like if we say the individual can always claim ownership of something that is fundamentally theirs, so we say like not in my name, not in my God's name, not in my hospitals, not in my schools, not in my country. We're delighted to oppose.
Now I would just like to say congratulations to you all. Thank you all the speakers for all your comments. Good debate. I would like to also say congratulations to all the brave guys who turned up here this evening to and it's a great honor to chair a debate in the field talent to do it. So we actually ran public speaking courses for them. And many women, and our chairman was President Mary Robinson, and look what she got to. And we had various ministers then followed on, such as Jim Matheson. Anyway, I think this is very impressive. I think it's a powerful means of encouraging talent and confidence.